Hi guys, we're Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Over there is Mitchell Allen, and
Right.
we're going to be doing a episode of QQ for you on Skyfall. This is going to be a discussion where we talk about spoilers. So,
Yeah,
if you're lost and you haven't seen Skyfall yet, please stop the video, go see it.
yeah,
It is most certainly worth your time. Other than that, we're going to get straight into it because there's a lot to talk about in this film, and we
yeah.
also don't want to make this film for too long. So I'm actually going to let Mitch sort of lead us off into conversation. As you saw our title, we do make a bit of a statement. I'm not sure how bold it is, but we basically say that we believe Skyfall is unlike any other Bond film.
For sure.
And so Mitch is going to sort of pitch our argument on that. So why don't you do it for us?
Well, it's a very bold. Yeah, now I really feel like the stepping up to the plate here.
Hit a home run, buddy.
Yeah, I know, man. It's what it is. It's the film is like just full of bold choices, I think. So the very first shot, instead of like Bond running into frame and like carrying a gun and chasing after someone, as many of them start. Some of them is like on a ski hill, and some of them he's like floating on a parachute. You should see just a montage of Bond intros at some point, Paul, because they're all hilarious. But this one, it's a very interesting concept where some of them also start with like I'm sure many people who've seen Bond movies is like the gun, and then he like shoots the bullet hole, and then he goes like straight into the title sequence. This one almost teases it in the opening shot, where you have like a shadowy figure walking towards, and then all of a sudden like that tension is diffused a little bit, and the scene goes a little bit slower than you're expecting. And I think about like 30 seconds later, it turns into a pretty standard, like really well choreographed and everything, but really standard like Bond chase sequence for the next 15 minutes. But as soon as Bond is shot, the movie is like becomes a very reflective, more like soulful thing, where it starts to comment on like Bond's past as a character, and
Well, like even right away is like with like we say Bond gets shot, but I mean like that's not a small thing. Like literally,
it's definitely not a small thing. No,
we see. I haven't seen as many Bond films as Mitch's here, but I would be bold enough to say that I highly doubt any other film has actually literally shot Bond off a
there was
train.
only like one. There's only one where he was like imprisoned or like wasn't in it for a little bit, but you knew that he was coming back, and it wasn't set up as potentially like as crushing for the character. Like it was sort of like, oh, he's lost, and then we'll find him soon. But this one decision that M makes sets him back a whole lot more than any other Bond movie. Like we're to the point where physically there's repercussions, which has never happened before. Usually he's like kind of Superman without any like flying, right? Because he's very intuitive and very smart, but at the end of the day, he's not really going to get shot or hurt. He'll just barely miss something, and then in this one I think you said it best. There's a lot of vulnerability to this character, and the way that they shape that makes it very unique, I think.
Yeah, and like we'll talk about the theme and sort of its cohesion and stuff, because like there's some stuff in the first 10 minutes that like even when Bond he jumps into the crane and like it doesn't protect him like in the first like Casino Royale. He gets in the crane, he drives through the fence, and he's protected. This one, the glass breaks and he gets shot right in the shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? And like even then when he's like walking through and like he's gonna move his shoulder, he's showing like pains. And so there's a whole bunch of other things that they set up through his 10-minute scene that like really sort of cement a theme. But like that's we'll talk about that in about 10 minutes.
Like that. But I think also we were talking about the pacing in the review, but the movie doesn't. I feel like the film doesn't feel like it has to resort to throwing another action sequence in front of you. Like it's not like Mission Impossible where it's sort of like the dialogue is filler to get you to the next great huge set piece that's there. It sort of is really focused on studying where the characters are in the present and why they're there, and how their lives have changed because of this one moment, which is I think for a Bond movie very rare that it's focused on a singular idea and a concept that's explored like very very in a very complex and dimensional way.
Yeah, and like Mitch said it to me when we weren't recording that like essentially we can boil what Mitch just said down to the fact that like the ultimate thrust of this film is that it's more of a drama than an action film. Because like even with Casino Royale, which is another really good Bond film, it was still inherently an action film, which is a very self-reflexive, very intelligent action film. Whereas this, as Mitch said, it focuses on the character moments and sort of the character struggles of Bond and M and all that stuff. I mean, like the end sequence of this film is like it doesn't end in an explosion; it ends in a right. Like,
well, I mean, there are explosions, but they're not. They're not the focal point. Like the camera literally looks at it and then turns away to the small house in the corner. Like it really is very different, I think, in terms of that trajectory. Yeah.
Why don't you also so like that was one of our main points is that like the reason Skyfall is so different is that its thrust is largely that it's a drama more than an action film. Not to say that there aren't huge action sequences that are great. Yeah. But you also mentioned to me that about the commentary of Bond as a whole and then sort of deconstruction. Why don't you explain that to the audience?
Well, I mean, first of all, like for those who may not be familiar, like when you deconstruct something, you're essentially examining all of the different parts of what makes that a full component. So, like for Bond is usually seen as a cool, collected character who's intuitive but more mysterious, and he's someone who gets the job done no matter what is in his way. So in this film, you have a character who's immediately shot down and is missing for a while and is not on duty, is not, reporting to the scene. And because of this one event, the whole organization of MI6, which, as a foundation, the Bond series is like pretty solid for, I think 50 years up to that film, actually. It's like the 50th anniversary. And then I would imagine many critics and many audiences were thinking, how much longer is this going to go on for? And the film literally, examines that by having Ralph Fiennes come in as a council board member saying, we may have to shut down MI6 or think of a different way to do this because it may not be working anymore. It may be antiquated. And so the movie deals with, what is important to keep traditionally and what should be more progressive and more, have like MI6 and I think by extension the Bond films go in a different direction. Like, is that important or should we return to where we were? And I think the movie focuses on that a lot in its plot mechanics as well as just in its dialogue and sort of like letting you know that's how it feels. So it's a very self-reflexive and it kind of looks at Bond history and examines whether, it really was valid or they need to go in a different course. And I think the movie plays back and forth with that a lot.
Yeah, it's and that is why we think Skyfall is a very a Bond film, unlike any other. Why don't we start to branch out a little bit more and just talk about sort of individual pieces? Because I do know that we get a little bit excited when we want to talk about certain things. So why don't we get to the part that I'm sure a lot of people are interested in terms of the villain? What you mentioned to me right before we were recording that you thought you had an idea of why you liked the villain so much.
I think the reason why Green didn't work for me. Green is the villain from Quantum of Solace for those.
The environmentalist, sort of.
The environmentalist. But here's the issue. He's very much a singular person that if you know Bond as a character for years and years, you know that he could easily overcome one small figure. Like he feels like one of, I think I said this in the last review, one of 6 billion people. Whereas there's something about, I think Le Chivre to some extent, but I actually think even more Silva in this film, that feels like ghostly and almost like a powerful god. That seems his tentacles seem to like reach way farther than they should into the world, and it seems like nobody can stop him. And because Bond does and figures out a way to do it, I think that makes Bond as a character stronger and makes it like a more formidable hero because he has that incredibly formidable and spooky and ever-reaching villain. rather than just someone who came up with an evil plot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something about the presence of him and the persistence of that character that makes him a great adversary for Bond and makes us really care about Bond defeating him.
Yeah, and like in Quantum Solace, the main sequence with the villain is the guy just has an axe and swings it at him, right?
Mm.
And it's just like Bond. Okay, sure, in this film, Bond gets sort of torn down a little bit, and he doesn't actually pass the test or whatever. But I mean, like, we can, with Quantum Solace, we know that Bond's going to beat the living crap out of Don McGreen. Okay, in Skyfall, Bond is a little bit broken physically, and Silva was an agent himself. He's really strong, but even then, like, we're not too afraid physically for Bond. But you said it really well. It's just like it feels like he's smarter than anyone else. Especially the big thing for me is like Bond used to be like the muscle, and like M would be the sort of like the brain, so like they would work well together to like any holes that either of them have, they can work together to fix them or like fill them in. But with Silva, it seemed that he knew exactly where the weak links were and like how to separate them and all that sort of stuff. And so if it was able to, like, he would be able to isolate Bond and focus on, like, basically outsmarting him or something of the like, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just really neat to see that. And I think one of my favorite parts about this film, and I think it's as good a time as any to bring up the theme and all that sort of stuff, is that among other things, I mean, and I'm simplifying it a little bit here, but the film is basically about Bond and his vulnerability, right? And okay, history and stuff like that, but it all sort of ultimately comes back to Bond being broken and vulnerable. And every scene has to do with that, which is really, really cool. And it's just always, they always do very sort of subtle visual things. Like, the one thing I can think of right away is like when he's chasing the guy in Shanghai and he sees him going in the elevator.
Yeah.
He puts the gun in his pocket, and as soon as the elevator starts to go up, he goes and runs and catches onto the elevator, right? And all of a sudden, you just get a shot of just Bond being like, "Oh man, this hurts."
Well, in any other Bond movie, that is a 10-second sequence where he jumps on, and then like 10 seconds later, the elevator gets off, and he climbs on, and then like he starts fighting the guy right away. Yeah. But in this one, they focus on how difficult holding on is, which is a really interesting choice, and it's a great scene in and of itself.
Yeah, and it's like that's why part of the reason the villain's so interesting is he's aware of all this stuff, and like one of the best scenes I think in the film is when it's been sort of shown a few times that Bond is having a little bit of trouble shooting things, and his aim is not as good as it used to be, and then he's brought out into the middle of a plaza of this abandoned island, and the Bond girl, which we'll get to later, is placed in the middle of this plaza, and he basically he's like forced to try and shoot a shot glass off of her head, right? And the reason why it's like, okay, first of all, that's kind of neat, where like Bond's already, oh no, if I miss, I'm gonna kill him and all this stuff. But like part of the reason why the scene is also so good is that it's been built up from like the very beginning of the film. Right? With Ronston, as he's walking through the thing, he's already, like, quite unlike Quantum Solace, where he's just like, fuck you, bang, 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 everyone dies. In Skyfall, he's already like, I need to stop the bleeding, he's gonna die out, all sorts of stuff. He's showing compassion for people. Even his enemies and stuff like that. He's not throwing people off buildings or anything. And
he's showing compassion, and he also gets angry when M doesn't allow him to do that. Like, you can see that drives the rest of not only that he was shot like by that female agent, which, should we reveal the name now or just carry on as is? Anyways, but like the fact that he's shot by that person, by M, is one of the things that he's pissed off about. But very specifically, there's one argument that he has with M saying like, why didn't you let me stay with him and save him? Which is usually Bond just like carries on and keeps going. But I feel like his conscience is starting to catch up with him in this film, which is, I think, after 50 years, another like interesting thing for Bond to deal with.
Yeah, and And like that's why like that scene with him trying to shoot the shot glass off of the woman, that like that's why it's so good. It's not just like with filmmaking, like sometimes people come up with a good idea for a scene, but it doesn't quite pan out as well. It's not as emotionally as strong as you think it is. Is that because it spent the whole film or all that time beforehand to build up to that moment, right?
Yeah.
And so like doing all these little things will add up, right? And like that's what it means to have a film that's very thematically cohesive, a film that's multi-layered. Is that each scene is it's moving the plot forward, but it's also doing 3 other things. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the scene gets him from Shanghai to some other place that I forget where he's going. But it not only does that, it shows that he is weaker, he's, more compassionate, he's whatever. It's done 3 other things.
Yeah.
So that when you get to these climaxes, they are all built up. And like that's why I like this film so much, is that, whereas the Casino Royale, it had sort of like 1 or 2 scenes like that, notably like the, Daniel Craig being in the chair. This film, it has a number of them,
I think Casino Royale is more oriented to getting you used to the character again. Because, like, after, I think the last film before that was, like, Die Another Day, which was, like, 4 years before it, and was terrible. So I imagine, like, a lot of people, like, gave up on Bond, or, like, screw this, like, who wants to do this? So I feel like Casino Royale's job was not only to deliver like a well-reasoned like plot and like a good action movie, but also to sort of get people okay with Bond again. But now after the last 2 movies had happened, now we can be more comfortable and start to address, what makes Bond interesting or what can make Bond interesting.
So, what were your thoughts on sort of the thematic cohesion? Do you have anything to add, or do you want to just go on to like, Bond girls?
I mean, I think the fact that not only is Bond vulnerable and has a conscience, but he is given a backstory that really fills in why Bond has been so elusive and so cool in the whole series. And the backstory reveals that, first of all, he's an orphan, and he grew up in this.
Although we didn't know that from
we sort of did know that, but it's revealed like
for the first
like
time.
There's more details about it which we've never seen before, and so we go back to this old home and we see that he's had an emotional connection to someone, this gameskeeper there, and I think like thematically the idea that Bond has never found a home is a fascinating it's just a fascinating concept. And so that's, when Bond travels the globe and, like you never see him like in his own apartment and he's just traveling from mission to mission. It's almost like he's compensating for never really coming from somewhere. Like his parents are dead and this is the only place that he can call a home or a ground place. And then in the end, he sort of has to destroy that and make himself into, his own home or his own idea. And I think the movie does that really well, and it's really powerful in a way.
Yeah. Why don't we kind of go into sort of how this film tackles the idea or our expectations of a Bond girl and that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, because one of the, like, not that I didn't like this sequence, but one of the weaker sequences for me, maybe just either it was the pacing or whatever it was, but was the sequence in Macau, which is they're in, I don't remember if it's a bar or a casino, but they're in I think it's a casino because he cashes in like the chips and then like gets all the money and then meets this woman. I think the actress's name is Bernice Merlot or something, but I'm not sure if we ever learn her character name. But there's a lengthy discussion with her at the bar, and then obviously like he does his thing and seduces her and joins her on the boat on the way to Silva. And it's a necessary scene to get us to the villain, but I don't know that I resonated with that as much as I did with the other characters and the other scenarios that we were given in this movie. So why did you connect to it so much? Because I feel like it really worked for you.
Well, it's not that it really worked for me. It's just like, because you and I both had sort of small issue of, it was like the first time I saw it, I went, okay, where am I in this film in terms of time? And I had that sort of feeling in the second half of the second act. But I guess I just this is not my first time seeing it. It was my second time, right? So
Yeah.
I just really liked the idea of them, that being the filmmakers, sort of building up this Bond girl and being like, okay, this is gonna be the new girl. She's gonna have like, this is sort of the whole thing.
I see what you're saying.
And then killing her, right? And like that's I mean, yeah, okay, they did that with Eva Green's character. That's, I feel you can just say it's automatically kind of different.
Yeah.
But it was just I don't know.
Also, they do it with Eva Green's character in the end. I see what you're saying. Like this one is almost a midpoint plot point, and then after that, you know that it can't be about that relationship with the Bond girl anymore. It has to be about him and M or him and Silva.
Yeah, and and it's just kind of nice because like it's not often that someone, because I guess it's just like the idea, the anticipation that he was like, I could kill him, I can protect you, I can do all these things, and then Bond doesn't. And maybe that's what I find so interesting is that like, unfortunately, like it kind of makes that character a bit of a plot device. I do think she still had enough flesh to her that it was like kind of interesting on her own. I felt like she had more of a story than the Bond girl and like Camille in Quantum of Solace.
100%, yeah.
But the fact the filmmakers had the nerve to kill her off and then basically be like, Bond fucked up and or they couldn't succeed and there's still a story to tell, right? And like, and there's just it's like sort of the failures and like all this stuff is starting to build up on Bond, right?
What they end up doing with the female characters, I think, is then it's relegated to the other female agent. Again, we're not going to name her yet. And then M.
Why not?
So, well, okay, fine. I guess they've seen it. So like, Moneypenny and M, right? Spoiler alert. No. Moneypenny and M are now either, Moneypenny is a capable, like, quick-thinking, action-oriented, like, female character. And then you have this commanding, thoughtful, but, like, sort of doubting character in M, who's going through this very odd transition in her career and her life where she's dealing with what she's had to, what the legacy of MI6 will be, and what her legacy will be, and how that carries over. And I think what they do is they invest the female characters with more of an interesting arc. A lot of the characters have great arcs in this, but usually Bond gives female characters the short shrift in terms of development, and they really invest them with properties that make them be real characters and real people.
I'm gonna just right now out myself as like some bad person, but I have no idea the relevance of Moneypenny and sort of what she means to the
No, that's fine.
To the canon and stuff like that. So why don't you enlighten me?
If you've seen any, I'm pretty sure it's any Bond movie before Casino Royale, Moneypenny is Bond's secretary. That is her character. That's it. Bond has a secretary named Moneypenny, and then they have like witty banter, and they're sort of like flirty, but nothing really happens between them. And then she like helps give him the assignments and sends him to M, who's a male character in also all the other Bond films. And then it's M and Moneypenny are like the administrative staff, and then he goes on his adventures somewhere else. So when you don't know who Moneypenny is for most of the film, you just think it's a new character they've introduced to this film. And it's similar to when you realize that Joseph Gordon-Levitt, maybe I shouldn't spoil another movie, but The Dark Knight Rises has a similar character thing where they reveal someone is you know what I mean? So I think basically the role of that character ends up being like assuming a position of an older Bond movie trope, which is a little problematic for me because like there's a lot of groundwork for her character to really, be a little more seductive, but also like more in control. And then they sort of relegate her back to that secretary.
Yeah. Although she's secretary to M, right?
Yeah, I mean it's still not awful, but it's sort of
it feels like you're building her up just
she makes the decision to get out of the field because she made that one horrible mistake, but it was just sort of like, it. And also they get rid of Judi Dench, who's a terrific, one of the better characters in the Bond series in general, and they bring her back to a male M. So it's, I don't know, it's an interesting decision that they make. I don't know if it's problematic. It's just going back to basics.
You know what my biggest issue with that whole thing was how they revealed it. It was just like, we've never been formally introduced.
Right.
That is the only line in the film where I'm like, what the are you serious? Are you telling me you go through a 2-hour film and not know each other's names? Really? I don't buy that. That's just bad. That screams, hey, let's do something now. It's just there could have been a way better way of doing that. Yeah. I mean, hell, you could have had like a nameplate or something on her desk and just like do a really crappy camera of anything else. It was just so bad. But I mean, like I still gave her some an A because I think like I'm just gonna pretend that moment doesn't happen, and that he just knows her name is Moneypenny and just whatever. Right. I'm just that's what I'm gonna do with it. Yeah. But why don't we talk about the climax, and then we'll kind of end with sort of our hopes or expectations of Spectre. Yeah. But I'll set it up, I guess. And when I saw this film, I guess 2012, because that's when it came out. I was a lot less sort of analytical about films. I had a lot harder time seeing sort of themes and everything. So if I can learn how to do it, you guys can too. But I remember being pretty underwhelmed by the ending. Because I didn't understand sort of the emotional relevance or the emotional importance to why Silva wants to do what he does. I just saw it as sort of like when my brain was off to all that stuff, that was basically, well, that's a lame way to kill a villain. He takes too long to kill who he wants to kill and he gets stabbed in the back. But I didn't realize that the whole purpose for Silva is that I'm gonna make it a very, I don't think, bold statement that he was an orphan as well. Not to mention that like M says that easiest or the best recruits are orphans, but the fact that Silva calls her mom, and he keeps talking about being betrayed, right?
Well, he was literally abandoned somewhere, right? Like she left him somewhere because they had to trade off, right? So she used him as a tool when he thought of her as a companion.
Yeah, well, not even a companion, but like someone.
As a
parental
maternal figure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so that I think that's a perfectly fine arc. And like Quantum Solace, they did something similar with like a very sort of simple idea, but this is how you execute it. But anyways, and like so I realized like it was worth to Silva to get, because he was in pain, right? And he felt betrayed, but he wanted to bring his mom, and in a theoretical sense, with him. And so I understand now, like, why he would risk taking so long to go and actually do it, and like to shoot her just because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Like it would not get him what he wanted. And I was just curious, sort of my interpretation. Do you think I'm totally off my rocker?
No, I think it's very apt, and I also think what's great is, again, I think some of the best Bond villains sort of reflect Bond himself, or some of the best villains reflect the heroes in most films or stories. But in that sense, I mean, Bond is an orphan, Silva is an orphan, but also Silva really hasn't found a home, hasn't found a place, and Bond, I think, is starting to feel attached to some things. So when M eventually dies, Silva has sort of won in a way, because Silva has achieved what he wanted all along, to bring, like you said, to bring her with him. But at the same time, it's sort of a win for Bond, because Bond can now, without M, detach himself from that emotional bridge he's been making with people and just become the most fully formed, dedicated agent that the film is trying to get him to be. Because I think he's,
sorry, not to intrude, but I find really interesting because like that's both like sort of a win for James Bond, but it also it's quite tragic because he becomes. We were talking about like our hopes for like Bond, like these stories that come out will be more about Bond with a soul and less about like, hey, look at me on a surfboard kind of thing, right? That's a very bad reference to other Bond film, but and that's really interesting, is that it's ultimately a very tragic ending for Bond, right? He becomes a better agent, but is he truly happy, sort of thing. One thing I wanted to bring up with a sort of endings with Bonds in general is I realize like with stakes with people like Batman, Bond, Superman, all these people, but let's focus on Bond in particular, is that we know that they can't die. Or if you do that, like it's the end of the series, and then you have to reboot. So okay, fine. So like once every 3 or 4 films, you can kill off your main character. So if we know as filmmakers or as audience members rather that the protagonist can't die, I realize that this series what it does very well is that it goes, what can Bond lose? And so Casino Royale does a very good job, and like the thing that he loses is Vesper, right? With Skyfall, he loses M, right? And I totally forgot.
M, but he also, I think what's great about Skyfall is it adds another element. He's losing his integrity as an agent. He's losing that character, and Skyfall gives him the opportunity to destroy, Skyfall the home and M and everything, and be reborn. Like I was actually browsing through my notes just now, and like I think that Skyfall is both a eulogy for the Bond series and a rebirth of the Bond series. So it's saying that we know this is almost coming to an end, but we still want to give this another try, and it's doing the exact same thing for the character, I think. And it's just feels sad a lot of the time, melancholy, but at the same time, there's hope that we're just going to keep seeing new things from Bond.
Yeah, and like I think that's what's really neat. It's just like where filmmakers have to find ways. Because if there are no stakes to a film, especially something like Bond or whatever, or Batman, I don't care. I really don't.
Right.
But like films like, let's not spoil anything, but like other different films, like Dark Knight and all these sort of things, like these characters, that's how you create stakes for characters that you know just cannot die, right? Is that you make them lose things, or that is what it's at stake, right? And like sometimes people like some of the most heartbreaking things ever is when a parent loses a child, right? Like that's horrific, right, in real life. And so sometimes there are worse things than dying, right? Yeah. And so it's like I wish that on nobody ever. But when like as filmmakers we're making stories, we have to find these avenues of like, okay, what's worth
what can be tragic?
What's worse than death for some of these people, right? And so I commend this series and like Sam Mendes in particular, and like I think that's actually a good transition into Spectre. Is like, okay, what are our hopes, or like what do we think? And like honestly, I don't, just because this film is so good, I don't think it's gonna be better than Skyfall. No. And like I don't. My concern is like I don't know if they can build something and make Bond lose it.
My feeling is sorry.
No,
my
go for it.
Well, my feeling is that the ending of Skyfall is quite brilliant because it really does a full reset on Bond and like gives him back the Aston Martin and gives him like Moneypenny and M and gives him like the cuffs and everything in the tailored suits. So he really does feel like the Bond that is in the 49 years before it. But my feeling is because of that ending, the logical way to follow that up would be to do more of a canon Bond, where it's just following like him defeating a villain, and it's a little more of the tropes. It can be clever. It can be a lot of fun. Like Goldfinger is like one of the better ones I can think of, or GoldenEye is great for that too. A lot of golden titles in but I feel like the movie's gonna err more on that side. I would be curious to see though if they continue this. What does Bond have to lose, or what is the emotional resonance of this character? Yeah, I mean, and because of the same director and writer, who knows? Maybe.
Yeah. I hope that they can find something interesting, because I think it's just largely because of my taste. I like things that have a dramatic thrust, and like I enjoy films that do that. Like the only action film I'm like, action because action is like Raid and Raid 2, right? Those are mostly the films that
For me it's that, and then also the Furious movies. They could have anything in them and I would love them. They're all so
no.
And here's the thing. It is such the opposite of a Skyfall or like an intelligently drawn out action movie, but I love it because it just goes balls out in the opposite direction. And It is my absolute guilty pleasure. I shouldn't love it, and I love it to death. The last 3 Furious movies are insane. They're so funny to watch.
All right. Yeah. Well, it's very clear that Mitch and I have something to talk about off air. So I'm going to end it right here.
Paul's really upset.
My name is Paul Weston. Over there is Mitchell Allen. And we're going to have a Spectre video for you in about a week's time. We're going to be trying to get it early next week.
Or we'll see. Well, earlier or later, we'll figure it out.
Soon, we hope. Not too late from when it comes out. Again, join us when that happens. But for now, take care, guys.
Bye, guys.